there's a story that is an iconic story, and story isn't the wrong word for it, because often, we give you classical definitions of words, and I will even do that around faith. But a story that feels like it's an iconic expression of how I've understood my own path. And so it comes up, and for every now and again, and then it sort of goes off and other stories come up, but I want to return to the story because it's so central in my own faith. And this is about a time in the 80s when my partner and I of the time were taking a long trip. She had been working in the post office, like pretty much non-stop, and I, being a flighty country woman, was like, come on, let go of your job, let's go on an adventure. And so we'd bought this old Dodge 1967 van, which will later feature in the same story, and did it up. And so we lived in Albion at the time, and we started on our way down, and there was a heading somewhere in Sonoma County that said Medicine Wheel Gathering. And I was into landscape design. I think I was working at the Mendocino Botanical Gardens on a CETA job at the time, learning landscape design. And I said, oh, that's like herbal plants. Let's stop and go and see what's going on. And so we stopped, and it ended up being a gathering of indigenous people and allies. And we came to a circle with a woman sitting at one end who was smoking her pipe. And she was unusual in that she had the pipe, and she was also wearing a twin set, pearls, and like a Scottish plaid skirt. So unusual. And so we're all sitting in the circle, and someone beckoned us in to join in. And then soon afterwards, a young woman stumbled in, severely distorted, like folds of skin hung over her eyes, and her legs were really big. She had elephantitis. That was a common disease where I grew up in South Africa, but you don't see it much in this country. And she came into the circle and sort of collapsed in front of the pipe carrier and said, I don't want to live. And Evelyn, who I later met, blew these smoke rings on her, blessing her. And then she said, the earth is carrying all this pain, and in order to survive, she has given each of us a part of it, with the prayer that we carry it and heal it for her. And this woman sobbed, and Evelyn said, and my faith is that whatever we're given because we can carry it. It felt a profound reframing of how to carry what I had carried as a child, just a tremendous amount of suffering, perhaps like some of you as well. And the reframing of somehow taking what I've been given and receiving it as the reason why I'm alive, that I am alive to heal what I've been given. And I know that some of us have easier times this lifetime round, if you believe in multiple lifetimes or many, many lifetimes, or just even parts of our lifetime. Others have a lot to carry. It isn't only for me about the earth offering it. Even as a young child, I remember saying to my mother, why is there so much suffering? You know, and I can't actually remember what my mother said, but I remember asking her because I couldn't understand why there was so much suffering, living kind of in the center of a country where there was so much suffering. And I got that we are called in some way or another from all our different places of birth and origin, from all our different experiences, that there is something calling us, and I'm not just talking about the Buddha saying I'm interested in suffering and the ending of it, of something calling us from our experiences to answer that question and to not just answer it conceptually, but to say in some way, I'm here to hold this and carry this. That healing the planet is healing myself and healing you, and healing you is healing myself and healing the planet. And it works in these mysterious ways. And it is in some way that not just my suffering, but our lineage of suffering, the earth's lineage of suffering, our parents and our ancestors' lineage of suffering, as queer people, as trans, as Jews, as Muslims, as Sufis, as people who are neurodivergent, that all of us come in through particular gateways where we are given something, where we say, I'm called not just because this is about me, but because this has been given to me to help rebalance and heal the world. That's how I want to translate the Buddha's teaching. Not like there is suffering and an ending of it, but here is the calling of life, our ancestors, not just life, personally, here is the calling that I'm answering. I don't know if I want to read what he says, but there's this amazing person called Jacques Lucerian, and he's written this incredible book, And There Was Light. he was blinded when he was young, and he ended up in Buchenwald. Maybe I will read it. And he survived, and I think he died. He's since died, but he survived being in Buchenwald, and just barely, and ended up being in Hawaii and teaching as a professor. So a fair amount of the book is about the conditions and what he survived, and I don't want to go into that because that feels like a little intense, but this is what he says. Here my story ends as it must for the man I am now, husband, father, university professor, writer, has no intention of telling you about himself. He wouldn't know how, and he would only burden you. If he has recorded the first 20 years of his life at such length, it is because he believes they no longer belong to him as an individual, but are an open book for anyone to read who cares to. His dearest wish was to show, if only in part, what these years held of life, light and joy by the grace of God. And now, in conclusion, why has this Frenchman from France written his book in the United States to present to his American friends today? Because he is America's guest. Loving the country and wanting to show his gratitude, he could find no better way of expressing it than in these two truths intimately known to him and reaching beyond all boundaries. The first of these is that joy does not come from outside. For whatever happens to us, it is within. The second truth is that light does not come to us from without. Light is in us, even when we have no eyes. And this feels sort of like a theme, sort of coming in from different gateways about the acknowledgement of the request the earth and our lineage and ancestors are making of us, and how we receive that. And then I want to talk a little bit later about how to hold that. And then why Evelyn framed it that way. Because her partner invited my partner and me to come to Evelyn's house. And there were a small group of us, half indigenous, and then a few white people. And Evelyn just started to train us as pipe carriers, not even like asking us if we wanted to be trained. And so, which just was some, what can you say, fortuitous event in my life. So along with the teaching of holding what is given, she took me aside one day when she asked me, "What are you grateful for?" And I can say very humbly to you, I told her, I can't think of anything. So perhaps I was having a very hard time that day, but I can't remember. And she said, "Do you have a car?" And I said yes. And she was riddled with cancer at the time she was teaching us. And I suspect that she thought she was going to die soon. And her calling was to try and transmit as much as she could from her 20 years studying to be a medicine healer. Because she said the earth needed so much help and it needed so much prayer that whoever came to her or was serendipitously invited by her partner, Edie, she was willing to transmit the medicine teachings. So she took me and leaned on me because she was in a fair amount of pain. And we went to this old beaten up van. And she said to me, "Does it have 4 wheels?" And I said yes. And she said, "This is what you can be grateful for. Does it have a steering wheel?" And she said, "This is what you can be grateful for." And we spent half an hour going through all the different parts of the van. And each time, when I answered, "Yes, it has it," she would turn to me and wait for me to nod before we went on to the next part. And so what I got from her teaching is a little bit about what the Buddha is calling us to, which is on the one hand, this invitation to end the lineage of suffering in the ways that we can, and the other is to reclaim and to grow the qualities of strength that allow us to do that. And it began with her, with the practice of gratitude and beading, because she said beading, so I learned how to bead, which was really a trip, because it's very minute, tiny beads that you bead. And she said to me, "You need to bead because you need to cultivate patience." So I learned how to bead, and then we did many prayer circles, and at one point in the training, there was a big knock on the door, and she opened it, and there was this very big man there, and he was crying, and he said, "I hurt my back, and I'm in so much pain, and someone told me you could help." And so he came into the room, and she moved everything out of, got us to move all the furniture out, and she lay him down, asked him to lie down, and people helped him. And then she got, this wasn't part of the story, but I'll just say it because in a way it is. She got her crystal and put it on top of him, and her pipe and a feather, and she saged him. And she started to pray. And I could hear the beating of the wings of an eagle in the room. She called the healing in. And we were witnesses. And at the end, he got up and walked out. And this is the power of our love and healing when it's developed. And at the group today, I talked about Nalanda the elephant, and I haven't spoken about Nalanda in a while. And so I wanted to talk about that too, because it's a similar story of Nalanda, this amazingly beautiful elephant that was part of the king's entourage, because the elephants were very important parts of the royal family in the Buddha's time. And this elephant had gotten wounded, I can't remember why, and had broken free in her pain and started rampaging through the villages and just destroying huts and trampling on people. And there was an incredible amount of fear. People, when they heard, because I don't know if you have ever been in a game reserve and felt a herd of elephants running, it's incredible. It's like the earth shakes with their pounding. And so I know because I experienced it. And so anyway, when the villagers felt that kind of beating, and they would run away, and the Buddha happened to be close by, and so everyone was saying, just kind of like the Angulimala story, you know, Lord, run, this terrible elephant is coming and is huge and is killing people and destroying everything. And the Buddha turned, stood still, and the Nalanda came like running directly towards the Buddha. And the Buddha started offering metta for healing and well-being to Nalanda. And the power of that love, that energy, was so palpable to Nalanda that she bowed in front of the Buddha. So, naming what we all know already, which is that love is real, it's palpable, and that it's healing. And we know that because we've all experienced it. And we know the opposite of it. So that lifts up its power. That hatred is the opposite of love. That hatred only brings more hatred and can never bring healing. And love is the antithesis. When we claim that heritage, and that's what we're doing, the heritage of love, because that's also what we've inherited from the earth. We've inherited the gift of her nourishing us, of her holding us, of her plants and trees and their deep eldership and offering to us. When we claim that heritage, we're claiming both what we're given and then our capacity to heal that. And that's where faith is born, in that claiming of, I've been given this and I've been given the capacity to heal it. This type of faith isn't about, and that's why I began with making mistakes. This type of faith isn't about not making mistakes. And that means that sometimes what happens is painful and what happens hurts. Sometimes it's unpleasant. Sometimes it's triggering. And underneath that is this desire and wish to find a way to heal. And not that there is a way, but to find it, to find where that opening and that door is. And we do that together. And I think one of the biggest obstacles to faith is the misunderstanding that we have to do it alone. That in some way we have to carry this burden alone, and in some way we have to heal it alone. But I think that's impossible, and I know why Thich Nhat Hanh says that the new Buddha will be a Sangha. Because in a way he's saying we can't rely on one person or one savior anymore. We have to do it together. And you know what's so interesting about that? Is that I have done 3 3-month retreats at Plum Village and several 1-month. And one of the directives, because when you're there for a long time, you get to kind of know the scene, is that you cannot have a best friend. And when I was there, I was like, why not? Why can't you have a best friend? But because seriously, when you're living with people, you tend to like some people more than others, and you want to hang out with them. And there are other people you don't like so much, and you tend to avoid them. But I got it. And the other thing I got is that no one had their own room unless they were a senior nun or monk. Everyone had to share a room. And that, otherwise you couldn't stay there. The only time I got to have my own room was when I was sick. Why? Because we had to find a way to work it out. We had to find a way to work it out. And so his way was having a community meeting every 2 weeks where we had a flower in the middle, and the beginning was picking up the flower and appreciating someone for their beautiful qualities and efforts, and then sharing what was difficult and hard, about how someone said something or did something that was painful or hurtful, and working it out. Or it could have been, I want to work it out with you, and I'd like to make a time, but you say it publicly first. And so it wasn't that there was an immediate solution, but a commitment to the process of how do we find a way to support each other, because we can't do it alone. You know, and I'm saying this because we have a sitting here at the center every morning and every evening. And in the evenings it's online, so you can drop in anytime you want. And honestly, because I'm not that great about the computer, I sometimes wish, I wish we didn't have to be online, because I'm in front of the computer so much of the time, and yet I love it as well, because it's a way of saying we can't do it alone. We have to come together and practice together, and we need to do it in an ongoing way. So when I talked about the other Dharma talk about building a bank, like how do we hold this huge river that sometimes engulfs us with all the pain that we're living with, then one of the ways, and this might be one of the hardest for us, is to really receive each other's love and support. Is to be willing to, even just a little bit in the beginning. In the retreat that preceded this retreat, was dedicated to Ruth, the founding teacher here, founding teacher, guiding teacher, my teacher. And I mentioned how much I hated. I was in despair the first retreat. And what brought me back was the ritual at the end of the retreat. And I was like, wow, could I do this here just to pass on the lineage? Well, you can let me know. So at the end of the retreat, we sat in a circle. It was the ending circle. And people had given her flowers, and they had been on the altar. And right before the circle, she had taken them and depetaled the flowers. And she came to the circle with a basket of flowers. And she went round and grasped a handful, and she dropped the flowers on each of us and offered a blessing. Like Nalanda and like Evelyn, I could feel the love. I could feel the blessing. And I was like, oh my God. Like, I know it's ridiculous to say this, but it's like, love is real. And it wasn't like I hadn't loved all my honeys in some way or another. I had. But there was something about this that was different. It's like, it's palpable and real. And someone that honestly, in some ways, I hated and I thought was an egomaniac, because that is what I thought of her on that first retreat, that I could feel that blessed. And you know, and and I didn't even plan to come back. It's just that some other people were coming and they were dropping off something where I lived. And I said, where are you going? And they said, oh, we're going back to Ruth's. And really, against my will, this is the power of that blessing. I said, hang on, I'm just going to get some shorts and a t-shirt, because in those days, she got a little strict about what we wore in here, but in those days, I packed like a bag of shorts and t-shirts, and I was in that car. That is what we actually offer each other, because I know that inside of each of us is this wish to bless each other. And through that blessing, we come to know our own capacity to bless. And that being blessed awakens something inside of us that says, it's real, and how can I access it? How can I build my path to it? How can I become a being who offers blessings? And I have been the recipient of so many blessings from my teacher. And it can be as ordinary as going to the post office. This is when I was younger. Still being a gardener, earning $4.50 an hour, because that's what teacher wages was $4.50 an hour. and getting a card saying, "Oh, I just thought you needed some money," with a check for $100. Like just that, let me send Arinna a check. Usually it's the other way around, right? Students send their teachers Dana. But just that. Or well, that's enough of that. Let me read this. This is from Mandela, who I have to say was even young, because he was part of the organizing that happened in my house. He already, even young, was someone who had a particular dignity and grace. And Tutu says that only grew through all his years of imprisonment, and he could never have done what he did without those 27 years in jail. But this is what Mandela says. It is from my comrades in the struggle that I learnt the meaning of courage. Time and again I've seen men and women risk and give their lives for an idea. I've seen them stand up to attacks and torture without breaking, showing a strength and resilience that defies the imagination. I have learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. I have felt fear myself more times than I can remember, but I hid it behind a mask of boldness. The brave person is not the person who does not feel afraid, but a person who conquers that fear. I never lost faith that this great transformation would occur, not only because of the great heroes I've already cited, but because of the courage of everyone in my country. I always knew that deep down in every human heart there is mercy and generosity. No one is born hating another person because of the color of their skin, or their background, or their religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. Even in the grimmest times in prison, when my comrades and I were pushed to our limits, I would see a glimmer of humanity in one of the guards, perhaps just for a second, but it was enough to reassure me and keep me going. Our goodness is a flame that can be hidden but never extinguished. So, sometimes when we're in a forgetting, when we are covered in our pain and our confusion, when it seems like there's no gateway, then we know that this is a time when we're triggered, and that it's so important to name that that's a trigger, and that when we're in a triggered place, it by definition means that we cannot find our resource of faith. And it's so, and you please share too, you have a different experience. So I'm only talking about my own experience. That when I name that, then I know that it isn't that this is the only reality always, but for now it is the only reality, because that's the definition of a trigger. The trigger is that it takes over and we're in confusion and we cannot find our way. So I just want to say that. In that acknowledgement then, it feels really important for each of us to know what our resources are and our gateways are that will support us to reconnect. And it might, and I'm sure it's different for different people because we come from different lineages. So I just want to name what has been helpful for me, and you can see if this resonates with you or is helpful at all. Depending on what's going on, I have watched 4-5 episodes at a time of Netflix. Just giving my mind a break. Or watched 2 movies, just like one after the other, to give myself a break. Or I've read some ridiculously easy detective novel that takes hardly any cognitive power from beginning to end. Sometimes you just need a break. Sometimes you need to go to someone and say, I need you to love me up. Do not try and fix me. Do not try and solve what's going on. I just need you to tell me why you love me, or why you're my friend, or why you care about me, or just tell me that I'm beautiful. And take 10 or 15 minutes to do it. Remind me of all my beautiful qualities. Sometimes it means taking my drum and drumming, going out and drumming. Sometimes it means turning the Isley Brothers on, taking off my clothes and dancing nude in my living room. Because there's something about taking off all my clothes that helps me to feel my body. Feeling my body helps me to come into my body. And hearing music that I love helps me to return as well. Sometimes it's the exact opposite. So I've mentioned this before. This is last year. Last year I went on a medicine journey in Peru. And I had this journey where I found myself like imprisoned. But it wasn't a prison. It was like locked, paralyzed in a space where I had no connection to my capacity to intend. I couldn't love, I couldn't care. It was like being profoundly and deeply dissociated. It was just the most incredible suffering. It was like being really out of my body and having no access at all. After the journey, because after the journey we all came in a circle and talked about it, I said it was one of the most intense sufferings I've ever experienced. I knew that I had to move my body, and the agreement was that you couldn't just like split the scene during this whole, it was like from 7 p.m. to 3 or 4 a.m. So you had to be there. So I went outside and I just walked, and the whole kind of ceremony ended. And it's not like I could feel it, but I knew that if I kept walking, there's this poem by Anna Swift or someone. No, it was Naomi Shihab, when she says you have to catch the thread. You have to catch the thread of and lift. And that's what I was feeling. I have to keep walking until I can catch this thread of connection. So I did placing until 8 a.m. the next morning, because I knew I had to keep staying. Even if I was sort of out of my body, I had to keep on offering myself the invitation. And I stopped at 8 a.m. because it was breakfast and we had fasted the night before. And then later that day, I got, and this is going back to the beginning of the story, because now it's getting late and time to end the talk. Oh, this is the gift of this journey, because this has been living in my DNA and I had no idea. And because I had no idea, I couldn't heal it. And it's been amazing, because that kind of intense dissociated paralysis, I recognize it. It doesn't come up so strongly anymore, but I recognize it. And I'm like, oh, this is a part of myself that I just haven't healed. I haven't cared for. And that when it comes up, this is the earth asking me to love it. And so I do. And sometimes it's, honey, I can't now, but you know I'm committed to learning how. That's what I tell it. Or sometimes it's like, yes, I wrap you in my arms. Sometimes I can't do it conceptually. I have a lot of drawings of me being a big mama holding, because I can draw it, but I can't say it. And sometimes I am in ceremony and I invite the ancestors and I burn my sage and I rattle asking for help. So those are the multitudes of possibilities, and I'm sure you have your own, of saying, here's how I hold what I've been given, and to carry on the lineage of healing and healers and liberators. Okay, I wanted to read a poem to end with. This is what I brought. It's in my pile. This is a chant that we could do and make up our own tune. This is beautiful. This is from David White. I actually wanted to bring one from Alice Walker. But I have a Joy Harjo one. I'll read both. I want to write about faith, about the way the moon rises over cold snow night after night, faithful even as it fades from fullness, slowly becoming that last curving and impossible sliver of light before the final darkness. but I have no faith in myself. I refuse it the smallest entry. Let this then, my small poem, like a new moon, slender and barely open, be the first prayer that opens me to faith. Nancy, was that too slow? Where are you? Oh, there you are. Oh, excellent. I knew you were there, but now I just grokked it. Good, so you can hear it.
I could hear it.
Yeah, very good. That's enough. Let's just sit for 25 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Thank you, everyone, for your presence and your listening. Thank you.